A very good evening to all. On behalf of IAP Digital Media team, I, Dr. Uthra Mohan, welcome you to this webinar on Telehealth, a new dawn for healthcare. This webinar is being streamed live on IAP India YouTube channel. I request all to subscribe to this channel to get regular notification during our webinars. Today's webinar is being organized by IAP Women's Cell Mumbai District team of Maharashtra State. The moderators for today are Dr. Preeti Baikar, District Coordinator, and Dr. Divya Makwana, District Subcoordinator. Now I request the moderators to please take over.
Good evening, everyone. I, Dr. Deepika Makwana, Sub-Coordinator of Mumbai District. We are doing a webinar on today's Telehealth, a new dawn for healthcare. So this is arranged on occasion of World Physiotherapy Day, which is on 8th September, but we are observing an Physiotherapy Week that is from 5th to 12th September. IAP Women's Cell functions under the guidance of our national head, Dr. Ruchi Varshne ma'am, and our IAP president, Dr. Sanjeev Jha sir. We have 5 zones in India with heads for each. That is Dr. Pooja Kamble ma'am is the West Zonal head. The state team of IAPWC Maharashtra includes the state coordinator, Dr. Suvarna Ganvir ma'am, our joint coordinator, Dr. Snehal Patel ma'am, and our sub-coordinators, Dr. Uttara Mohan, Dr. Priya Kandande, and Dr. Nirali Sanghi. In Maharashtra, IAP Women's Cell has conducted many low-cost activities like CME workshop, public awareness campaigns, health camps, blood donation camp in various districts since 2018. We have also conducted webinars on various topics in orthopedics, neurology, pediatric, women's health, cardiopulmonary, geriatrics. In the past 1 year, IAPWC Maharashtra State and its district teams have conducted a total of 103 activities. Today we have with us Dr. Ambarish Akre sir. He is a founder and CEO at PhysioEd. He has completed his master's in musculoskeletal and sports from prestigious KLES JNMC Belgaum in 2018 under RGUHS Bangalore. Sir is a certified Mulligan concept practitioner and also internationally certified COMT in spinal and peripheral joint mobilization from prestigious Melbourne University, Australia. He is also certified in McConnell concept practitioner and has learned from Jenny McConnell herself. He is also a kinesiotaping practitioner from Kinesio University. He is an internationally certified ergonomic practitioner. He has conducted over thousands of ergonomic training sessions and in a leading companies in Pune, India. He has over 16 years of clinical experience, which includes 10 years of academic teaching. He was a lecturer at Sri Swaminarayan Physio College, Surat, from 2008 to 2009, assistant professor at Singhad Kashibai Navle Physiotherapy College in Pune from 2009 to 2013, and associate professor at DES Brijlal Jindal Physiotherapy College, Pune from 2013 to 2018. Sir is currently a site-led working as a clinical physiotherapist in Geriatrics, Australia. He is a recipient of Care Hero Award for Best Employee in his company for the New South Wales State, Australia 2020. His aim is to help physiotherapists across the globe have easier access to eminent clinically skilled resource professionals. So today, this webinar is being conducted by IAP Women's Cell Mumbai District, where Dr. Preeti Baikar is the coordinator. I myself, Deepika Makwana, and Dr. Masuma Ladiwala are sub-coordinators. We would appreciate your feedback on this webinar. Please submit your feedback on the link provided at the end of this webinar. During the webinar, if you have any queries or questions to ask to the resource person, you may post them in the chat section. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for the kind introduction. I would first take the opportunity to thank Dr. Ganveer ma'am, Dr. Preeti, Dr. Deepika, and Dr. Mausama for conducting this session on a Sunday evening, taking your time out. So without wasting any further time, because we are running a bit late, if I'm not wrong, I'll share the screen. And Dr. Preeti, if you could just confirm whether you can see the screen, okay?
Yes, sir.
Is it, yeah, see, all right, thank you. All right, the topic for today is telehealth, and this is something which has always not been that common, and it has become common since March 2020. And no one can forget what happened in March 2020 is when the cases of COVID actually started to hit in most parts of India and even in Australia. So telehealth is also called as telerehabilitation for us. And the topic which I've chosen, or the words which I've phrased, is that a new dawn of healthcare. That means we, all of us, have no particular idea as to how long COVID would take to go. As if we have now accepted that COVID is the new normal now, and perhaps we should start accepting the fact that COVID will be there around us. Maybe we can keep it in control by having the vaccinations in place and doing all the right things. But we have always seen in the last 1.5 years, a surge of cases always happens. And we go into a second wave, we go into a third wave, and we have the lockdowns again. Like, we are in lockdown for the last 3 months here in Australia and Sydney. So telehealth has cropped up from them. So I'll get straight into the presentation and see what we can discuss here. So what's telehealth for us first? Okay, so telehealth is like a normal consultation, what you would have with a patient. The only difference is a telehealth won't actually be one-on-one consultation, whereas telehealth will be something a patient and a physio will be present during the consultation virtually. So it will be an audio-visual platform. The physio and the patient are not going to be co-located. They'll be away from each other. And hence we would also call them as a virtual consultation, or we'll also call them as a video consultation. Okay. So what can a telehealth actually consist? Can it just be one-on-one call? Like you pick up a phone and have a, what you can say, a WhatsApp video call or a Instagram video call? Is it that way? No, it cannot be that way. So obviously a telehealth requires a certain amount of specifications in terms of assessment, in terms of clarity, in terms of clarification of the diagnosis, recommendation of the treatment, reviews, and also the best current practice model. Okay, so what I would mean is, it is not just a video call, it is just not an audio call in which you would say, like, come on, you're going to do 10 sets of quadriceps drill, you're going to do 5 sets of hamstrings, 5 sets of calf raises. No, it's not going to be that way. Obviously, it requires a selection criteria, that is, who is actually eligible or who actually is in a position to conduct the telehealth conversation or a telehealth consultation. Okay, so as I said, it is really important for us to determine who is actually suitable for a telehealth. Like, is this particular patient indicated for a telehealth consultation? Does he have enough resources around him? Is the technology in that part? So commonest example I'll give is, if it's a regional area or a rural area, is the technology allowing a proper telehealth consultation happen? Are there Wi-Fi issues? Are there network issues? And also the urgency of medical care. So when you talk about urgency, obviously telehealth cannot be delivered in a critical or what you can say emergency situation. It is more like a pre-planned session, which has to be during what you can say a non-urgent setting. Besides the physio's participation, it is also important for us to realize that consideration of the client's capacity is also very important. Okay, so not everyone is suitable for a telehealth. So we'll say common example is, if you're having a video consultation, like whether you're doing it on a virtual platform, say even like a Practo or even a Zoom, what you can say consultation, are the clients having any sort of a visual or a hearing impairment? That's one thing which has to be first ruled out. Because if they have any sort of a visual or a hearing impairment, then obviously the telehealth or a tele rehab session is not going to work out there. Okay, so first that has to be ruled out. So integrity of the visual system, integrity of the hearing system has to be there. Additionally, services should be provided according to the referral line. That is, there has to be a proper referral system. So the consultation has been referred to the physio, and it's one-on-one consultation between the physio and the patient. You have to make sure that's what is required. Okay. Also, in some situations, it's always better that when the patient is doing a telehealth session, he or she has somebody near him. So it can be a family member, it can be an informal carer, or is someone who is going to act if something goes wrong with the patient. So obviously, you're first ruling out that there should be no emergency situation. There is no critical care required for the patient. Secondly, even if it's not a critical care, we have to try and make sure that besides the patient, at the patient's end, you have someone around him. So it can be a family member or a carer. Okay, I'm going all right. So these are some common articles I have put because I don't want it to be sounding like a PowerPoint presentation that gets a bit monotonous. So I've just put a few articles. Now this one is coming straight from Adelaide University. So these are more Australian articles because that's where I'm coming from. And even the guidelines which I've followed are more from the Australian Physiotherapy Association, but these are applicable across the globe. So I'm talking in context to the Indian setup. So learning from the COVID-19 to improve access to physiotherapy, in this article, they have proved that definitely in the 6 months, because this study was done in September 2020, in the 6 months from when the COVID started till September 2020, it was found that the telecommunication or the tele-rehab gave very good results when patients trying to have access to physio. And this is more in relation to the regional setups. So when you're not able to get access to the proper city setup, tele-rehab has been found to be a real, what I can say, a new dawn, rather I can say, because it reduces the patient's time factor and it reduces the cost involved as well. Okay, so besides the many advantages, there obviously are a few disadvantages. But talking the positive, this article mentions that in COVID-19, access to physiotherapy was definitely improved when we started having a tele-rehabilitation services. Now, for us to have the decision that, whether it's actually going to allow us to have a proper tele-rehab session, there are a few factors which are really important for us to consider. So these factors can be in terms of a clinical perspective, they can be a practical perspective, in terms of quality, in terms of safety, and in terms of knowledge. Okay, so in clinical, we would obviously say that there has to be continuity of care, that even if the situation gets worse, we should be making sure that the care model of the health for the individual or for the patient is to be taken care. So one tele-rehab session will be followed up with another, maybe after a few days, after a few weeks, but there has to be continuity of care. So it can be in terms of tele-rehab session, or you might have 2 or 3 tele-rehab session and split it between a one face-to-face session and again a tele-rehab session. It can work out that way, depending upon whether it's the area is in a lockdown or not in a lockdown. Or it can be another sort of what you can say, a continuation of service that you're going to see the patient once a week, every Thursday, suppose. Okay. In terms of practicality, you have to have the adequate technology. So the first important thing is obviously you should be having a proper network or a Wi-Fi system there at both the location. That is at the physio, definitely it will be there. But at the patient, it becomes sometimes a tricky situation, especially when it's coming from a village or when it's coming from a rural setup. So does the patient have the access to use a app or to use the network and to get online and to communicate his problems effectively on a computer? This is really important for us to actually make out. In terms of quality, obviously the quality of technology will play an important role. The factors will be the same. It can be a network, or it can be in terms of if it's actually a sort of a group session, we have to make sure it's spacious and the physio is able to supervise all the people who are there in the group session. So the quality of the camera has to be really good. Okay, so that is really important. Safety. Now, one-on-one sessions are more safe, definitely. Group sessions, because we do have, you must have seen group sessions of say Pilates or group sessions of group exercises, yoga also being done. There are so many platforms which conduct yoga sessions virtually in groups of 15, 20, 25. Now that's all right if it is a normal individual doing yoga in a group session. But if I have a Parkinson's group, and we are addressing the Parkinson's Society here, suppose I am addressing a Parkinson's Society, is it safe for me to have more than so many Parkinson's patients together? No, we cannot. So obviously the safety has to be paramount, and we have to make sure that there's somebody around the patient to make sure that the patient is not at a risk of fall. That cannot be compromised. Also, the knowledge level has to be there. So the person who is conducting the session and even the person who is taking the session, there has to be some amount of understanding in terms of knowledge. The physio should be able to recognize and tell the patient effectively that this is what I want to deliver. Are you in a position to conduct the session effectively? Also, the physio should be having an interaction with the carer or with the family to make sure that the session is to be safe for the patient who is involved there. Obviously, now, as I said, this is a sort of a trust factor. So trust is a two-way factor. It's from the physio to the patient and vice versa. So it can be an intrinsic factor. It can be an instrumental reason as well. And the client must be confident that the data security or the privacy protocol will be followed in a non-digital practice when gathering, storing, and sharing the data. So example, we have all consented for today's webinar that it's going to be recorded, and we are all right with this being telecasted later or being put streamed online. So we have given a consent. So similarly, in a tele-rehab setting, what I can say, a consent is really important, that the patient should be able to give a consent that yes, I'm all right with the session being recorded. And likewise, even the physio should give the consent that yes, I'm okay with this data being recorded and being accessed to later in the future. You must also adhere to some common ethical principles to cause no harm, to act fairly, and to use the healthcare resources wisely. So obviously there's a lot of ethics involved in this, and the ethics is similar to a face-to-face session. So sometimes it's a very wrong understanding that people feel that a tele-rehab is just like a normal telephonic conversation. No, it's not. And especially in parts like US or Europe or even Australia, this is actually, we have to follow all the ethical principles which are followed in a face-to-face session also. So there's no difference in the ethics involved in a hands-on session or it's a tele-rehab session. It has to be the same. So adhering to the ethical principles, the most important thing is there should be no harm. And the physio needs to consider how he's going to make it a systematic approach, a safe approach, considering the way in which the environment can support safe, high quality practice to be delivered for the safety and for the effectiveness of the rehabilitation session. So this is a very sort of a basic image which I've shown. There's a physio there and he's conducting a session. Now you can consider this as three different individuals. So is the physio in this image in a position to sufficiently supervise three individuals doing three different exercises, making sure each one of them is safe? If he is able to, yes, it is a good session. If there's a safety compromise or if one patient is at a risk of fall, then no, we need to modify that environment. That is not a good tele-rehab session. It has to be either modified by either getting 2 or 3 carers be there, or it has to be modified in terms of what you can say, reducing the number of participants. Now, even in this, there can be two ways it can be done, that all the patients can be at one place and the physio can be at another place, or all the patients themselves will be on a different platform and the physio will be at a different platform, which makes it even harder because there you'll have one patient on a different platform, different place, the other patient in a different place. These all should be supervised. Another article here says that this was coming straight from Melbourne, and it says that the physio and the patient response experiences, they documented them over a period of few months after the tele-rehab was started after COVID. And the conclusion or the results said that the results were very good and there was a positive experience experienced with the telehealth by all the patients during the COVID-19 pandemic. So obviously it was a session in which the research was conducted such that they conducted a mixed method as in it's a study design in which you are basically using your conventional research practice as well as a interpretation or a mixture of the data. And the conclusion was pretty good. They said that, yeah, it is a positive outcome, and we can't say all, but the article said that most of the patients gave a very positive feedback saying that they benefited from the telehealth session. Now, since I am more in a musculoskeletal setup for all my years, I have to put a musculoskeletal research article, and this was published in Musculoskeletal Science and Practice, Elsevier publications. It said for telehealth for musculoskeletal practice, and this was from Queensland, Australia again. And here they said that if you're doing, say, Pilates sessions, or you're doing online sessions for, say, group exercises or stretching, or say warm up or cool down exercises, or for athletes, it said musculoskeletal physio practice also benefited by telehealth, because the patients could maintain the level of intensity of performance even if when they were in a lockdown, or whether they could not access to a physio face to face. So even being at home, telehealth benefited in the musculoskeletal physio practice for these patients, because the intensity of the warm up, or the intensity of stretching, or the intensity of the rehab was still kept intact by the physio through virtual sessions. So as I said before, it is just not about giving exercises. There's a lot of ethics involved, and the ethics is in the same standard of professional image, what we can say. So the first and foremost is, like, when I'm talking with all of you, I have to make sure the environment across me is quiet. I can't have a background noise here which will interfere the session. So quiet consulting room is really very important. There should be no noise in the background. And the physiotherapist communication technology should be such that there should be no disturbance, and the patients are able to effectively hear and see what the physio wants to tell them. Okay, it should be a plain decor. There should not be any sort of visual images on the screen which will disturb the attention or concentration of the patient or the physio. It has to have a good lighting. So wherever there's a good lighting, it should be reflecting well from both the sides, and there should be what you can say, a high intensity light, or sort of a LED light from behind the physio involved in the video session, such that the physio is properly exposed, or the physio is properly highlighted what he wants to show. So if I want to demonstrate some exercises, say shoulder internal external rotation, stretching, or something for hand behind my head or hand behind back, now these things, my position of the camera should be that the patient should be able to see the entire upper torso of my body along with the shoulder movements, and me touching the backside of my head or backside of my back. Okay, so the lighting is really very important for tele rehab. It should have ready access to clinical equipment which is required during a telecommunication. So this is just two very small basic images which I've put. And the attire should be professional. So you cannot have a tele rehab in which somebody just gets up from a bed and jumps in straight in front of a computer. If it's a physio, if you're working in a hospital setup, you have to have an apron on during the tele rehab session. If you're involved in a sports session, you should be having your sports physio attire on. So you cannot just be in casuals, or you cannot be in denims. You have to have a proper professional attire. And the same applies to the patient as well. So the patient cannot be in tight clothing. So if you want to do, say, a stretching session, a patient cannot be in denims. He should be in a proper track pants or a proper loose clothing, such that the patient is able to effectively carry out the tele session. So there's nothing different from a face-to-face and a telehealth session. There's no compromise in the quality. It has to be everything like a face-to-face session. These are the guidelines from the Australian Physiotherapy Association. Okay, so obviously there are a lot of similarities which I talked, but obviously there's going to be a lot of difference between a face-to-face session. So in the activities involved, it can be very helpful for us to explore how the information of the patient clients about the video consultation. So are the clients in a position to understand what is a tele-rehab session? Are the clients safe, which I already talked about? Is there a match between the clinical needs of the client and the use of a video consultation? So not all the diagnoses or not all the conditions can be actually, what I can say, be carried out in a telecommunication setting. It has to be also that the session has to be requiring the telecommunication effectively. So it can be in some critical conditions, as I said, you cannot have a tele-rehab session always. It has to be a clinical necessity that the session can be carried out effectively. Ensure that the care is effective. So obviously there'll be what you can say a follow-up, making sure that the session of tele rehab, whether it's one session or whether it's multiple session, at the end of multiple session, is there a specific amount of a prognosis made in the health condition. So for the preference of clients with respect to video consultation, the important thing which we can consider is what happens prior to the consultation, what happens during the consultation, and what happens after the consultation. So it's like, are we able to see some sort of an outcome measure? So we use outcome measures very, very regularly in our face-to-face session. So even in telecommunication, there's no compromise in that. You should be having an outcome measure. So after you do one session or after you do 4 sessions or 5 sessions, is there a difference in the pre-video consultation or during the consultation and after the consultation? So the outcome measure has to show some amount of a change. If it does not, obviously there are two things: the telecommunication of the telehealth session has not been carried out properly, or this condition maybe not be effective in a tele-rehab. It requires more face-to-face because the patient is doing a lot of trick movements, or maybe the patient is doing some movements which the therapist cannot control being in a tele-rehab setting. So that's really important. So besides the health setting, it's also valuable to determine how will the billing be determined, like, will the billing and how the claiming rebates. So this is different in India, this is different in abroad. So I had a session with one person from USA yesterday on my channel PhysioEd, and he was from the US. So even he was talking about billing system. So in Australia also we have two billing systems here. One is called as a private system and one is called as a public system. Now public system is just like what we say in India, a government setup. Okay, so everyone gets access free and everyone like it's covered by the government. Whereas in a private setup, this requires billing. The billing is what we call as a third-party insurance. That is, the patient does not pay for it. It is paid by the government or it is paid to the insurance company. Now, there's no exception that tele-rehab does not follow the normal principles of face-to-face. Tele-rehab also has the same principles when it comes to the billing. Okay, so physio needs to comply with the laws of that area. Now, if you're talking of the US or Europe or Australia or India also, there is a certain amount of legislation which determines how safe it is. Now, in Australia, we call it as a physiotherapy board or the national law or the board registration standards, which has guidelines. And also the session should make sure that the patient has an insurance. Right now, not necessary in my practice in India that every patient is insured for physiotherapy sets, treatment. But here in US also, it has to we make sure that the patient has what we call as a professional indemnity insurance. So professional indemnity insurance, like if a physio does something like, does the session and there is some amount of a technical lapse or there's some sort of a negligence happening, is the physio going to be covered? So it's really important that the physio has a professional indemnity insurance in him, which will take care if there's some unnecessary trouble which is coming after the consultation. Also, we should be also making sure if the person is having a health insurance, will the health insurance cover the tele-rehab session? Because not necessarily all the health insurance policies consider tele-rehab as a equal component when it comes to the payment. Also, we have to make sure the amount of percentage, because not necessarily the face-to-face will have the same amount of a rebate as to a tele-rehab. So these all things should be well known by the patient before he starts the tele-rehab session with the physio or with the medical professional. These all have to be avoided, because if they are not discussed before, later billing becomes an issue. So we have to make sure that the physio and the patient both are aware of all these ethical sort of principles involved. Now in Australia, we have the Australian Physiotherapy Association, and when we all are members, we all have the professional indemnity insurance, which will take care of, like, if I conduct a telehealth session, it is covered for me because I'm a member of the APA, which will cover that my insurance, that the professional indemnity is taken care of. Also, the physio consultations, which are video consultation, need to make sure the billing is proper. So obviously the patient is not going to come to your clinic or to the hospital. So it has to be made sure that the billing is properly generated via email or a soft copy and is delivered to the patient. And also the billing is generated and sent to the insurance company to make sure that the rebate happens properly at the conclusion of the session. Okay, so it's a physio's responsibility now, like in all the situation, because we are the care providers, whereas the patients are the caretakers. So it's more our responsibility to make sure that the patient understands all these ethical principles and the setup in plain language about telehealth. It should not be sophisticated. It should be a simple layman's language. Also, the client should be aware that if there's some out-of-pocket charges which will be involved, that should be known to the patient. And he should also be knowing the amount of time. So if I know that the session is going to last for 30 minutes or 40 minutes max, I should be knowing that I should be concluding my presentation within that specific time and not exceeding that. Consent is another very important thing, and this has no giveaway in a tele-rehab. So people think that tele-rehab is a very cool thing. You can just have a phone conversation with the doctor. It's like a Google consultation or any of the online platforms which we have in India. No, you require proper consent. It can be even documented. So even when you start a tele-rehab session, a consent can be a written consent, which has to be sent across a mail to the patient. Okay. It is also necessary to arrange that along with the patient consent. In some situations, we require a family member's consent. For example, if the patient has dementia, the patient has a neurological condition and has a memory deficit and cannot take decision, then the decision has to be taken by the carer or by the family member. So the consent has to be coming from the family member. If a recording is taken, as I said, a consent is required. This is required before the session starts. For example, like today's session, we all have consented that this will be recorded. So this consent is the same, which is required for a tele-rehab session. And the client must also elect a family member during the initial consultation that he or she will be responsible if like decision making involves more than my decision. Like, so the family member should also be nominated. The client is also supposed to provide some information about the physio. So the client should be well aware that this is my physio, he's in this setup, I'm in this setup, and I'm aware that this physio covers my specialty. Like example, I'm an MSK person. A gynec patient coming for antenatal or postnatal care might perhaps not need me. So he should be aware that this is the specialty of the physio involved. So there has to be a sort of a technical system which is required in terms of assessment as well. For this to develop, like example, even for today's session, we need to make sure we have a proper mock demonstration. So even we did a testing of camera before we started the session today. We also checked the audio because we had an issue with the audio. That's why we had a bit of a delay. So all these things also need to be checked when you do a tele-rehab session, because the tele-rehab sessions are timed. You cannot afford a lapse in time, say because of audio lapse or to a network issue. So these all have to be checked. The physio needs to conduct practice sessions. He can do a practice like how you do before your examinations on your patients or on your friends to demonstrate something. So the physio should also be able to carry out the same practice session with the family member that this is the way I'm going to conduct it for the client later. So from the first principles viewpoint, it is obviously, we say safety is the most important, and tele-rehab, that's why we say there's a bit of a disadvantage, especially when it comes to say high level patients. So if the patients are not safe, if they have balance issues, or if the patients have say lapse of concentration, they require continuous monitoring, supervision, then tele-rehab becomes a sort of a issue, because you may not be able to give the same amount of care by a tele-rehab session, which you could obviously give in a hands-on session. So for them, it has to be made sure that, as we said before, the patient has to be screened, that he or she will not have any issues in following the tele-rehab session. It was also important to consider prior to consultation how these risks can be minimized. So example, if you're having say a group exercise, you have to make sure the space is large, there's no hindrances in between, so that there's no chance of the patient falling. So the patient should be having a safe atmosphere, a safe place to move about, such that it does not affect or does not put a patient at risk. And one way in which we can do that, as we said, is by having a family member there, or we can have a carer there. So make sure that the patient is kept literally safe. Also, if it's say a cardiac rehab setup or a cardiovascular setup, we need to make sure that some basic amount of vitals monitoring, so you can say pulse ox, so you can say BP, these can be monitored at the patient's end by the carer or a family member. So pulse ox is really important. If you're talking about pulse, your cardiac rehab patients or your post pulmonary rehab patients, you have to have this monitoring, so that we make sure that even if the person is doing say some amount of a 6-minute walk test or some amount of a cardio rehab sessions on a tele-rehab platform, he or she, the vitals can be monitored in case of emergency. Okay, so it has to be kept safe, and there should be ability to support the patient to use the technology and troubleshoot any difficulties encountered by the patient during the co-located area. So make sure that there's no compromise in the, what you can say, vitals monitoring. This implies especially for cardio rehab and pulmonary rehab. So innovations have come, and as you must have seen in the last 5 years, we have so many apps in India. We have Practo, we have Just Dial, we have so many. There are so many which have come now, which I'm not aware, and all of them have apps. They are now even delivering you tele rehab sessions, even in Australia, even in US. They're promoting that. So these are coming from the manufacturer, what you can say, the business end. Obviously, they have a health team which takes into account how safe it is from the medical point of view, but it is our individual responsibility as a physio or the patient to make sure that when you're using any innovation in digital and communication, that the session can be actually kept safe in terms of effectiveness and in terms of the communication. So the sort of interactions can be a telephonic, or it can be sort of what we are doing on a Zoom session. They can be apps which allow you direct access to the physio or direct access to the patient. We can use video clips as well. Now we have some beautiful sessions on YouTube. If you just type like Australia tele rehab and you say, put it on YouTube, you'll see a lot of sessions in which they actually show you video clips. So a physio is there, a patient is there, and you have a third window which shows the patient, this is the way you got to do the exercise. So the patient does it. And if he's doing wrong, the physio can quickly point out, no, look at it. The shoulder movement is this way. And then the patient can himself correct it with this other side. So there can be a telemonitoring in terms of exercise documentation or in terms of exercise demonstration by using a video clip. It can also have e-visits, like you make sure a lot of emails which are sent, or you can send a lot of data, say maybe articles or maybe images, or what we can say diagrams, how we have, face-to-face consultation in hospitals. We show like if this is a TKR patient, these are the exercises you're going to do. So these can also be given as a soft copy to the patient to make sure that you have a look. This is the handout of the exercises. Have a look at it. Now we're going to do the same exercises. Only the thing is, it's not a face-to-face consultation. It's a tele-rehab communication. Okay, so we're going to do these exercises, maybe your VMOs, your knee extension, your hamstrings, your calf raises, but they'll be documented on a what I can say, an exercise chart. It's also useful to see how safe it is in terms of a consultation with the client. You test the video consultation before we conduct it in terms of emails. Like we make sure that the session is effectively collaborated or effectively maintained in terms of an email response. And we can also set up a quick test call prior to the actual online consultation. So as a caretaker and as a family member, what is their responsibility? So the evidence suggests that the caregivers are satisfied and comfortable with the interventions delivered by telehealth. As a result, maximum sessions of telehealth, the family members or the caregivers have consented that yes, they want the session to happen because they have found it useful for their family member, and it is better than not doing the exercise at all. So if you're not able to physically go because of the COVID situation or maybe geographical distance, at least telehealth will make sure that the family member is doing the proper exercise program, even if it's a tele rehab. So they have given all positive, what I can say, feedbacks about it, except maybe one or two odd situations where the session might have given some rise to some local injury or some accident there. A physio also needs to make sure that he's also monitoring everything properly. So example, now if I'm a MSK physio, I cannot actually do goniometry pre and post in a tele rehab, but at least I can see it. So on observation, I can say this is a range of motion. And then I give him active assisted exercises for the elbow, maybe a bit of stretching for my triceps. And then I'm trying to do a functional, say, weight bearing on the upper limbs, say in terms of getting up, or you can say scooting on the bed. Then at the end of the session, the patient should be able to demonstrate, like, see, this was a range of motion now. Now also it's almost the same. Maybe I'm feeling it a bit more easy. So in terms of quality of movement, there's a change. So the physio can actually show that quality wise, even if I cannot do the goniometry in a tele-rehab session, at least I can visually observe my patient do a better elbow flexion extension during the session. So that will be an outcome measure. Also, in terms of technical failure, so example, if there's a Wi-Fi issue or something goes wrong, you should be able to quickly switch onto a mobile data. So you should be having the phone number there. So the phone number of the physio should be known by the patient, and the phone number of the patient should be known by the physio. So in terms of any technical issue coming up, they can contact each other directly on the phone, maybe on a WhatsApp call or maybe on a direct call. Okay, so basically these all are linked, and we would say the consultation should be known for assistance and can be sent for deterioration in terms of patient's condition. For example, an ambulance or call is needed. So example, so when you're doing a tele-rehab session, you should be having the idea of the address of the patient as well. This is really important, the complete address, where the patient is located, which government hospital or private hospital is nearest to his place. So touch wood, anything goes wrong in the consultation, the patient should be rushed to the hospital which is nearest to him. So the physio who's doing the tele rehab, even if he's doing say a shoulder rehab for a adhesive capsulitis, and if your patient is a heart patient, you might say, I'm just doing a shoulder rehab for the adhesive capsulitis. Why do I need to know about his rest of the hospital details around him? Because the patient has other comorbid factors, other medical diagnoses, say a cardiac bypass, and during your intensity of exercises, if the patient has a cardiac arrest, you should be in a position that you should be able to, what we have is a 000 here, in terms of emergency, be able to call the ambulance and say that this is a patient, this area, who was in a tele rehab session, and now he's just maybe had a loss of consciousness or has fallen. They should be able to rush the situation and get him there. Also, documentation is really important. So as I said, in terms of elbow range of motion or a visual observation, you should be able to record it. A physio should be having a proper patient notes. Maybe it can be another laptop, another computer when he's doing a telecommunication, or he can have written documentation in terms of what we call it as a checklist, or what we call as a cheat sheets. So what is a cheat sheet? It's like a plain paper which just allows the physio to check that this and this and this and this was done, and these are the improvements. After the session gets over, you use the cheat sheet and you enter the data into the computer so that you have a proper documentation. So this is really important. It can be a checklist, it can be a cheat sheet, but the patient should be, the physio should be able to document when the patient is doing exercises that this and this is happening, this and this is not happening. So documentation is really important, and the follow-up is also really important. Now, in terms of technology, obviously we have to make sure that the local area network bandwidth, smartphones, laptops, what we say, the technology has to be compatible. And we already talked about it, that the physio and the health worker should be well aware of it. So it can be in terms of what I can say, mobile apps. If the patient is comfortable, you can do it in a mobile app. I personally feel that if the patient is not having a good understanding about all the apps, it's always better to do it on a desktop or a laptop, because it's a stationary platform. It allows the patient to have a proper hands-free, you can say, rather than doing it on a phone, because then you'll be having some sort of a physical, what you can say, perturbation coming when he's holding a cell phone. Communication equipment is really also important. So your phones or your network should be having a proper frequency paired up, and the volume has to be proper. Pre-testing the camera like how we did before the session today, so that we have a proper angle and this eye-to-eye contact, because as we say in a face-to-face session, how the eye contact is important between the physio and the patient. Similarly, the eye contact is really important between the patient and the physio, because the physio should be able to follow what has to be done. Also, the audibility is really a big factor here. There can be some hindrances. It can be due to poor audio, or maybe a headset is like we had a few now. I had an issue, I could not hear. That was because of my Bluetooth there. So these things should be avoided, and it should be made sure that the session does not get affected because any of the technical glitches. So if you look at how this can be done, is before the session has been actually carried out, we even have flyers. So various hospitals or various clinics also have flyers for their tele-rehab session, that this is a tele-rehab session we are conducting in this difficult time of COVID. The patient will have a look at the flyer, and the patient can decide, like looking at the flyer, is this hospital or is this clinic in a position to help me? So the flyers, or you can say even apps, you have ads like, that we are going to run tele-rehab sessions. Are you interested? So you're conducting a tele-rehab session for, say, a stroke group. Then all the stroke patients, which may be in different parts of the country, can even think that, yeah, this is a stroke session. I can probably think of enrolling myself and registering for that, and see how the tele-rehab session goes, the first one. Depending upon that, I'll see if I need to carry it on further. So there has to be some sort of a, what I can say, understanding or some basic value which the patient should have before the session has to be registered. So that's how the basic presentation went. The references, if I actually say, is mostly the Australian physiotherapy guidelines, which we follow since last year here. There's been a lot of research being done in telehealth. I've just picked up 3 articles from different universities so that I make sure I cover all the policies. These can be implemented for both Indian setup, and these can be implemented even in the European setup. Obviously, Europe and US stands a bit different from what we follow in Australia. Australia follows more of the UK. US is a bit different, and Indian system, all the telehealth policies can be followed because Indian system is a bit more approachable or a bit more flexible, I can say. So it's up to you which you want to pick up. If you want to pick up anything which has been designed in your state or your country, you can do that. Sometimes you can also take help of online data which is coming from the US or from the Europe. Okay, so I'll open the floor now to questions. I will stop this screen share here.
Yes, indeed. It's an informative session and much needed, rather, I can say, the need for the hour.
Yeah.
And we have few questions here.
Yeah.
One is like how we can gradually shift the brick and mortar system in the rehabilitation to the tele rehab system, because people are still not yet comfortable or convenient, like as per the convenience, like we are so used to for the brick and mortar system.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question actually. So this can only be done by us conducting a free trial. Maybe you need to deliver a few sessions to the patients, which are free virtual sessions, to make them realize that yes, we can make a difference in tele rehab. Obviously, the situation is that if a patient has an option to have a face-to-face consultation, he will definitely go for that. You can't convince someone to have a tele rehab even when the option of face-to-face is there. Okay, when does tele rehab help you? If you know lockdown, so example, I'm in a lockdown. For my patients now, tele rehab is the only option. I cannot go somewhere because of the restrictions. Or as we said, the topic says, what is the new dawn? A new dawn is that even if tomorrow COVID stops and we have 0 cases across India tomorrow, still a physio's example, Dr. Preeti in Mumbai, can have a patient who is, say, in some North India, say in Delhi, and still carry on a tele-rehab session because the patient from Delhi knows that she is good in that service. So even after COVID settles, tele-rehab is going to become a big industry because patients sometimes have a preference that he or she is my physio and I want to take treatment only for him. Okay, so that can be addressed.
Yes, thank you for the guidance, sir. Another question what we have is, what is a proper setup or environment required for the tele rehab? Is there any specification?
Spacing is a very important thing. As I said, lighting is important, your software, your data is important. Spacing is more important, as is discussed in the slides, is more in the case of neurological patients or patients who have some sort of balance deficits or at a risk of fall. Because when you're doing some exercise, you don't want the patient to have some sort of abnormal incidence in which he lands for a fall. So spacing is the most important thing. Now, also I said tele-rehab sessions can sometimes mean that the patients are at different locations, or in some tele-rehab session, all the patients are at one location and the physio is somewhere else. So that session, the physio needs to make sure that all these patients are separated, properly spaced out, that their hands are not going to hit each other, or when they're doing some sort of a step test, they are not going to bounce into each other. So spacing is the most important thing. Yeah. And spacing also becomes important is because when you're using a tele rehab, your camera should be able to focus on the entire area. Is the camera setup allowing the physio to see the entire space? If no, then you cannot have a big setup and still do a tele rehab.
Great. So we have a physio who's interested in starting her own tele rehab setup. So she would like to know like how to start with it. Her name is Akanksha Asrani.
Okay, it can be started. Now, even in this, what I can say is, if you have a clinic and you have access, or you know a patient who's at his location, you need to first either virtually have a tour, what we call it as a virtual tour. A physio should be able to have a virtual tour with the patient and see what setup the patient is going to do the exercise. And likewise, a physio is supposed to give a video orientation of his setup to the patient, saying that I'm going to demonstrate these exercises in such a way. Are you able to carry out? So in terms of spacing, yes, it's very important. In terms of equipment also, so example, if the patient is going to do a few sort of step up exercises, or maybe he requires, say, not a parallel bar, but he requires something to hold on. It can be even a dining table. You may not have a parallel bar. So when you're having a patient hold on the dining table and do squats, example, is that safe? The physio should be able to see that. So these all need to be tested before.
All right. We have another question that is through YouTube channel. Do you think tele-rehabilitation has a power to replace the person or like a face-to-face rehabilitation?
It's a very open question. I'll say it has two answers. It cannot replace, definitely, because there's no substitute to hands-on, and physiotherapy is more hands-on field. So when the option of hands-on is there, obviously we'll want to go for the hands-on. Tele-rehab gives you an option of connecting to more patients. Tele-rehab gives you an option of choosing from a more number of physiotherapists. So that is the advantage. So example, if I'm in a location X and there's only a physio Y and I don't like the physio, okay, maybe he's not good or she's not good, I want somebody else. Tele-rehab gives me an option that I can have my favorite physio treat me, even if my favorite physio is sitting in some other part of the world. So that is the advantage. But when coming to the question, is it going to replace fully? It cannot replace. Definitely not.
All right, sir. We have a few more questions. Hope is that okay? And
yeah, definitely.
What are the morals or ethics, legalities, and patient privacies to be taken care of during tele-rehabilitation?
Yeah, these are all which I talked about. Many of them. This is not a question which I can directly answer now, but in terms of legality, as I said, the patient should be covered by insurance. The physio should be covered by professional indemnity. The session should be well documented. You should be having clinical notes, and there should be a consent. So each and everything which comes in a normal hospital or clinic setup, each and everything has to be followed in tele-rehab. Many a times what happens is because people are not aware of what a tele-rehab is, they just do. I know a few physios who are conducting online sessions with a patient without documentation. This is a big risk. Now, I'm not too sure in India how this will be covered up. If they do the same thing in an overseas country, they can lose their license to practice. Because if you don't have a proper documentation of your tele-rehab session, and tomorrow something happens to that patient, and if you don't have the notes done and it's not been e-signed, because you will require e-sign either by the patient or from the family. If the e-signatures are not there, and if the patient develops some abnormal reversal of post-rehab, the physio will lose his license in overseas. Whether that happens in India, how strong the Indian system is now, I cannot comment because I've not been practicing last 5 years there. But yes, you need to be safe. Yeah.
So in that case, sir, the one who is not so handy or techy enough, so like for them, how can we manage? Like especially in rural zone, if you want to, because in there, like in such places, patient cannot come over again and again for personally for the treatment. This is really useful. Like this tele-rehab really works, but the education, like patient education, also plays a role.
Yeah, it's a common thing. It can happen in India because of education. If I want to do it in some, say, regional Maharashtra, I cannot expect my regional village patients to be knowing about Zoom and tele-rehab. Or even if it's not only in India, I can say in Australia. If I'm doing it some regional New South Wales or Victorian state, and the patient is in 70s, 80s, they don't know how to use a social platform. They don't know how to use an app. So in that situation, we have what we call as a social worker. A social worker can be located in a regional area. Now, social worker need not be a medical professional. A social worker can be any community worker who knows how to use an app, who knows how to conduct the session. He can even use, say, what you can say, a screen. A screen platform can be used, and the projection can be done from a computer via oversight head projector onto the screen, and he can conduct it for the regional or the villages. So yeah, meaning there can be situations in which we can work out if education is becoming an issue, or what we can say, the online access is becoming an issue.
All right, sir. Another question what we have is what are the exact key points in the patient assessment and the health conditions via online consultations?
It has to be the same as a face-to-face, nothing different. So whatever you're doing, say if you're doing a first session, you should be having access to the entire medical history of the patient, which you would normally have like a patient file in a hospital. You should be having the entire data there. There's no sort of giveaway there. So whatever you do in a face-to-face session, entire history part has to be known by the physio. You cannot assume things. Secondly, if the consultation in telehealth is a first time online consultation and the patient has not been seen by a physio, so the physio has no idea what the range of motion is, how the reflexes are, then it's going to be a challenge because you cannot do a reflex assessment virtually. So you need some data there. So it's always recommended, like as much as the face-to-face documentation was there, it will help you to design a proper telecommunications tele-rehab session. If there's no face-to-face session ever, it will give you more challenges to do a session.
Great. And one last question, like how we can exactly monitor the patient's like progress, like as you already mentioned, like through observation, we can see
Yeah,
the range of motion improving and all, but
yeah,
how
yeah.
we can monitor whether patient is regularly doing certain exercises, like what do we give them the instructions, are they really following or not?
See, there's a big difference in what we say in Indian setup and the overseas setup. Is in India, we tend to call the patients daily. No matter what the condition is, we call the patient daily for 6 or 5 days to take electrotherapy or exercise therapy, whatever. And then we send the patient away forever, right? Mostly that's what's done. Whereas overseas, what we do is we do the session only once a week, maximum 2 times a week, but we follow it up every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, which is spaced out. Okay, so when it comes to documentation of the outcome measure, as I said, range of motion is one. You can even do it in a cardiorespiratory patient, that you can do it, say a 10-meter walk test or a 6-minute walk test. A 6-minute walk test can be done in a tele-rehab setting also, perfectly fine. If you go to YouTube, there are a lot of videos which show a cardiorespiratory physiotherapist do a 6-minute walk test virtually on a patient. Obviously, you'll require somebody at the patient's end to make sure they're safe. As I said before, you need someone, either a family member or a carer, but there's no nothing which can be not delivered. It can be delivered. The only thing we got to make sure it is safe for the patient.
Since you have given a brief about the treatment technique and in Australia, can you just give it more gist about the tele-rehab in Australia?
I think I lost your voice.
Yeah, can you just give us a gist about the tele-rehab in Australia? Since it's a developed country, it's convenient to follow it.
Well, here just for tele rehab session we cannot be given in 5 minutes. It will require proper tele rehab consultation. Uh, we do a tele rehab, like I have been a part of a few tele rehab sessions. We first need to have access to entire patient information. So you require access to entire patient file history. Second, you require an access to what you can say a trial. So before actual session is done, you need to have some sort of a video consultation or a video meet with the patient, telling that I'm going to do so and so things on you. These are going to be the exercises, and this is how I'm going to conduct the session. So yeah, that is the gist that we explain. We take a lot of what you can say. When we talk here, we talk it in very much a layman's language, and we try to make the patient comfortable that even if something you're not understanding, I will make sure you do the exercises safely. So there has to be a proper, what I can say, networking done. It cannot be answered in a question. Perhaps I can conduct a session. Whoever's asked the question, if he or she wants me to conduct a session, I can conduct it. But yeah, it's not possible to actually just answer that question in 5 minutes or 2 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. These were the questions, and you aptly answered all the questions. Now, I would like to give a vote of thanks. I think we are done with the session.
Okay, all
Yes,
good.
no more questions.
I'm happy to
And
take any questions. So, Dr. Preeti, if anyone would want to connect on my social platform, they can drop in. Obviously, I'll make it one thing very clear is that because you're geographically located in some part, like in different parts of the world, now I am following the rules and regulations of this country. So I can give an opinion or suggestion. I cannot give a consultation. Because if I give even an online consultation to somebody else in different part of the world, I can be in trouble. So I can give an opinion and I can do it on my social media. But when it comes to proper consultation with the patient, we are not allowed to do that. That's one ethical thing which comes into way.
yes, you have a social media platform and many are following it. But
Yeah,
through this, I think there are so many got inspired and can follow your page
sure.
like PhysioAid.
Yeah,
And on Instagram, you have Dr. Ambarish Akre officials
yeah,
also.
yeah,
Will give them details
yeah.
at the end.
That will
As
be good. Thank
now,
you.
am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, you're audible.
Yes. On behalf of IPWC Mumbai District, I, Dr. Preeti Baikar, Mumbai District Coordinator, would like to propose a vote of thanks to all the dignitaries out here and for taking out time, their precious time. Firstly, a huge thanks to Dr. Ambarish Akre sir for being here on IPWC platform and sending and spending a precious time for us, like to guide us. Also, throwing a light on such topic like a telehealth, which is a need of the hour. And we are really grateful for you, sir, for amazing guidance which you have been providing us. And during pandemic, I feel this was a topic who got highlighted, and people were actually seeking the guidelines and much more information about it. So this was really in informative session, I would say. And through your experience and huge journey in the physiotherapy in India as well as in overseas, you provided indeed amazing information out for us. A special mention to Dr. Sanjeev Jha sir, President of IIP, and Dr. Ruchi Vaishnav ma'am, who is National Head of IIP Women's Cell. I would like to thank Dr. Pooja Kamble, who is a Zonal Head. We are really grateful to IPWC Maharashtra State Team, Dr. Suvarna Ganvi ma'am, who is heading the state team and who is a Maharashtra State Coordinator. And she really mentor us in the best possible ways whenever we are in need. She really guide us. And all the state sub-coordinators, including Dr. Snehal Patel, Dr. Uttara Mohan, Dr. Priya Karande, and Dr. Nirali Sangvi for always supporting us. Last and of course not the least, my district team, Dr. Deepika Makwana, who is state sub-coordinator, and Dr. Masuma Ladiwala, who are always there with me, and we stand as a team together, like always. We stand stronger and hope to uh, lead in best possible ways. Last but not the least, you all can follow our Instagram page, IP official India, IP India official. Dr. Ambarish Akre sir team is also there on the Instagram. His page is there as a physio ed. You can all log into that and subscribe the channel. Sir is always there to help you out in best possible ways and very prompt. Sir, I would like to really thank you and appreciate you for your prompt response. Being so busy, like you're always there and promptly there to correct us, guide
Always.
us. Yes. And on the like on this special occasion of Teachers Day, it was really great to have your this session
Thank you
being
very much. I would
in.
firstly, as I said in the starting of the session, thank you, the IIP team, Women's Cell Mumbai, and Dr. Suvarna Ganveer ma'am, to allow me have this platform. More, I would say, applaud because it's a Sunday. And to come on a Sunday during a Sunday evening and to do all this, I would really like to thank you to allow the session to happen on a Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all the panelists, all the participants for being here and taking out the precious time with us. Hope this was an informative session. We'll would like to get your feedback as well. So we'll share the link in personally. We'll share the feedback forms to you all so that we would like to improvise in further sessions and hope to see you, sir, again if
Sure.
possible.
Thank you.
Yes. So I think we should wind it up.
Yeah, all good.